Right off the bat, yes, I know, the title is a bit of an exaggeration. This isn't metal's most hated album, especially considering how big and popular of a band Sleep Token is. That being said, there's still a big section of metal fans who absolutely loathe this album and band as a whole, and do so very, very vocally. Still, I exaggerated a little, I apologize, please don't yell at me, I can't handle much. Anyways, not that you'd be able to tell because of how cute and adorable I am, but I feel very passionately about metal and metalcore and all of that stuff and that sort of genre of music. Oddly enough, though, I've never actually sat down and listened to Even in Arcadia by Sleep Token in its entirety until just now, but it's very, like, divisive nature is not a secret to me. Like I said a second ago, Sleep Token, obviously very popular band in the genre. They have like over 5 million monthly listeners on Spotify. This album has like 60 million streams. So this isn't like the worst or most universally hated album. But the people who hate Sleep Token, and this album in particular, are very passionate about it, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's a lot of people that rank this as like one of the worst albums of 2025 in a whole, like regardless of genre. And Sleep Token is going to become one of those artists that's like a punchline in a way, to put it like that, although in a less, like, I don't want to say mainstream way, because they are kind of mainstream still, but in a less mainstream way than a band like Nickelback was in the 2000s, but it kind of reminds me of that, like the way they get treated and the sentiment about Sleep Token online, that's pretty much what it reminds me of. But in the interest of fairness, and as someone who enjoys basically all ends of the metal music spectrum, I decided to not give in to the Sleep Token slander. As funny as it is so funny. Sleep Token slander is hilarious. I listened to Even in Arcadia in its entirety, and here's what I thought. From very early on, I got the vibe that this was a 56-minute album that could have been like 40 minutes. I'm very picky about songs that are longer than like 6 minutes in any genre, really. Within metal, I think it can be done very well, like Lorna Shore. Half of their discography is like 20 years long, still all incredible, and not very well. And I think that this suffers kind of from being the latter. 5 of the 10 tracks in this album are over 5 minutes long, and none of them felt like they justified that. None of them felt like they justified being over 5 minutes long, if that makes any sense. In that way, it definitely felt like the album dragged on a little longer than it needed to be, maybe like 10 or so minutes for 10 tracks. An hour is a lot of Sleep Token. He started half rapping on Look to Windward, and I lost my shit. Really just not a great introduction. Like, there's this hard-ass metal breakdown that I, expected going into the album that is pretty, like, well labeled as a metal album, and 2 minutes later I hear a trap beat. That being said, Past Life was one of the 2 whole songs I liked from Sleep Token before I sat down and listened to this whole album, and that's got the same sort of vibe. I'll touch on that a little more later, but maybe I'm just a hypocrite. Lyrically, I don't think the album is anything special. I'm a pretty big fan of, like, complex lyricism, and this isn't really much to write home about. That's not to say it's terrible. A lot of the lyrics come from a very personal place of dealing with the ramifications of fame, and especially, like, staying anonymous, the struggle of staying anonymous, despite having that spotlight under you, because, like, Sleep Token's an anonymous band, they have masks and all that shit. But it's kind of a snooze, and a fair share of the lyrics come across as wanting to be a lot deeper than they are. Like, how do I put it? It's like Tumblr prose. If that means anything to you, hopefully you understand what I mean when I say that. But it's a very, like, I'm 14 and this is deep, in a way. It's nothing horrendous, though. That being said, a couple of the lines in this album are fucking rough. In Provider, there's a line that goes, "Yeah, I see you, the only bad baddie spinning eyes in the room, the only good girl in this side of the moon," and good god, that is rough. Also, the ICU part was supposed to be a play on ICU, because the line before was, "I found it breathing through a tube in the ICU." That is just absolutely brutal. Like, I bust out laughing when I heard that. On that note, I'm well aware that lyricism is a very subjective thing, and what I like lyrically in songs might not be what you like or what you want to hear. I guess for a good example of, like, my personal taste, I'm absolutely in love with 156 Silence, probably one of my favorite bands out there in general. general, but the flow of their lyrics, especially in their last two albums, that's kind of my gold standard, at least as someone who is admittedly relatively new-ish to metal music and that sort of vibe. There's a lot of very different directions this album takes genre-wise, like outside of the baseline metal genre, which it's really not traditional metal. There's probably some better subgenres to describe that aspect of it. I would say like maybe alternative metal, but there's like some pop elements, there's some R&B, there's some, I don't know, it's all over the place, and it works to varying degrees throughout the album. I want to say I have a pretty broad music taste, so I think I appreciate the diversity and the like experimentation of sounds like that a little more than maybe the average music critic. Not to say I'm one of those. I really, whatever, I like what I like, but that's not to say it was all great by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there's at least something there. But I think the primary problem that a lot of people in metal communities and spaces have with this is that it's classified and considered metal, and it really isn't. Hell, it's not even really like metalcore or octane core even. Like, it's not anything really in that ballpark for the majority of the album. Obviously, there's elements of it there, given the band's nature, but there's breakdowns and heavier sections and all that. But it's clearly an album that was meant to play around with like concepts of different genres, without any sort of defining sound. I don't want to call it a concept album because I don't know, I don't really know if that's the exact case, but it lingers in that territory, at least in my opinion. I think it's just not accurate that it's classified as metal. It sets up the expectation of what you're about to hear, that just really isn't there. And then you hear a breakdown and then the guy starts rapping. It's really not, it's not what you expect when someone tells you, hey, listen to this metal album. I don't know, I'm not familiar with any of their previous work outside of Even in Arcadia, outside of this, or if their previous work is heavier or more metal focused. I don't know if they have that label in their previous music, so I can't really judge on that front, but I feel like it's kind of unfair to call this a metal album in a traditional sense. That's not to like defend it in any sort of way or say that people don't get it, because that's not really what I'm trying to get at here. But I guess for an example, it's like if you tried to classify Amo by Bring Me the Horizon as a metal album. It's just not. It really is not. It's much like Even in Arcadia, I think, an album that just kind of fucks around with genres. I mean, I think that Amo does that way better than this album does, but that could also just be that I like Bring Me the Horizon more than Sleep Token. That could be some sort of bias, but I'd much prefer Amo to this album. But that's besides the point. I mean, I respect the varying directions that the album takes, I respect what Sleep Token was trying to do with this, but I think if you look at the sum of its parts, it just kind of feels like an album with no identity. I think if they stuck to any of the sounds individually, it could have worked. Like once I got past the initial shock, I kind of started sort of maybe possibly liking some of the like rap sequences. Like I said before, Past Self is probably one of my favorite songs on the album because they stuck to it. They stuck to that sort of style for pretty much the entire song. And that's not to say that you can't beat switch or genre switch or anything like that mid-song, but it has to work, and even in Arcadia, just didn't work in so many cases. I feel like I'm at risk of sounding like a fence sitter with this, but it was okay. That's my genuine opinion. I have no like sensationalized or like overblown take on Sleep Token. I think they, in this album in general, especially this album, are both overrated and overhated, which I guess is oftentimes the more grounded take to have when an artist is this popular and draws so much hate from people who really don't enjoy them. Like, do I think this album deserves to have 60 whatever million streams on Spotify? Do I think Caramel deserves to have the 100 whatever million? No, but it's still like a listenable album. Like a few of the songs are in my playlist. A few. I don't like doing the album rating gimmick that much, but if you want a rating, I'll give it like a 5. Again, very fence-sitter-y of me. But it's okay. That is like simultaneously the best and worst thing I can say about this album is that it's okay. It doesn't leave me wanting more, but like I'm not offended that I had to sit down and listen to this. Like I said before, this album was maybe 10 minutes shorter. We're probably having a different conversation. But it got boring. It was so much that didn't need to be. It was there was an undeserved 8-minute track in this album, and it made me so angry. It's a damn shame, because there's clearly love and emotion put into this album, and it feels like a vulnerable step out of the genre, which does end up being more to Sleep Token's detriment than anything, like I talked about. Like, they tried, and I respect them for trying, but it just did not work out. I did a little research of this album's reviews before this video. Like, I went on a couple websites for music reviews, and I watched the Fantano video, and I think that this quote from Pitchfork puts it in a way that I can pretty perfectly agree with. Even in Arcadia is a metal album made by musicians who appear petrified of metal's fundamental pleasures: screams, breakdowns, violence, riffs, exhilaration, exaltation. At the end of the day, even though I did enjoy some of the elements of this album, and I think it has potential, it fundamentally isn't and does not feel like a metal album, and it kind of struggles to find an identity in that sense. I know I said that before, but I really do think that is the perfect way to put it. It is an album without an identity. It tries to do too much in a weird frame of time. It's just strange. It's a strange album. I touched on it a little earlier, but I'm still like relatively new to metal music. I will be completely transparent and come by that honestly. I'm not gonna treat my opinion as a fact, but this is something that I really do like talking about and diving into, so I'm probably gonna keep doing it. I guess that is my way of saying, have a little mercy on me. I'm also like I'm not a musician in any sort of way, so I'm not gonna like talk about the technicalities of how the album sounds or what they could have done different. I don't know music theory. I've tried. I don't know music theory. But that's gonna be all from me for now. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you subscribed the video, leave a subscribe. Let me know if you want to see more music stuff on the channel. Like I said, I really do enjoy talking about it, and I would be very glad to do more, so just absolutely, by all means, let me know if you enjoyed this, and until next time, I'm out of here.